The Blood Oath. If you survive this story, hit subscribe, because the next one might not let you walk out. The words flicker across the screen as a cold spotlight cuts through the concrete walls of Blackwater State Penitentiary, one of the most dangerous correctional facilities ever built. This is where the country's most violent inmates are housed. Men who control empires from behind steel doors. Men whose names never appear in public records but echo through cell blocks like curses. Men who don't just join gangs, they lead them. Tonight, the prison is on lockdown. Sirens wail in the distance, echoing through the ducts like a mechanical howl. Guards sprint across the yard, radio crackling with frantic updates. Something has gone wrong, horribly wrong. At 1:14 a.m., an inmate was found collapsed in the shower area of cell block D. He was alive when guards reached him, but just barely. His breathing strained, his pulse faint, and carved into the wall beside his body, a symbol. A circle split down the middle with 3 jagged lines crossing through it. The mark of the severed hand, one of the most feared prison gangs in the region. The victim, Miguel Duarte, wasn't just any inmate. He was a longtime enforcer for a rival group, the Iron Jackals. His presence alone should have been enough to spark tension. But nobody expected this level of ferocity on a night when the entire prison was already tense, already stretched thin, already bracing for something dark simmering beneath the routine chaos. Warden Elias Monroe arrived 30 minutes later, his jaw set, his eyes cold with years of experience. This wasn't an attack, he muttered as he surveyed the scene. This was a message. To who? And why now? That's where the story begins. Not with the violence itself, but with what came before it. A prison run by ghost leaders. Blackwater wasn't just a penitentiary. It was a battlefield carved into concrete. Inside these walls, 3 major gangs ruled their territories like kingdoms. The Severed Hand, the Iron Jackals, and the 5 Point Syndicate. Each faction had its leader, but the real power came from their ghostly inmates whose names were scrubbed from public files, whose histories were hidden behind sealed documents. They weren't allowed contact with other prisoners, yet their influence seeped into every fight, every deal, every whispered threat. And among these ghosts, one name held more weight than the rest. Caleb Riker, known inside as Wraith. Riker wasn't the biggest man in the prison, wasn't the strongest, but he was the smartest. A strategist, a manipulator, someone who could turn 2 allies against each other without saying a word. He had been in solitary for nearly 2 years, yet the Severed Hand operated as if he was still walking the yard. Every guard suspected he was still directing the gang. Every inmate believed it, but nobody could ever prove it. Until Miguel Duarte, Detective Marroquin, arrives. When the warden realized Miguel's injuries weren't just a prison fight, but the opening blow in something much bigger, he called in someone who specialized in criminal intelligence, Detective Marroquin. She wasn't intimidated by prisons. She wasn't shaken by gang markings. But as she stepped into the shower room and saw that symbol carved in the wall with such precision, even she felt the weight of it. That wasn't carved during the attack, she said quietly. This was done earlier. Someone planned this. She crouched next to the victim, her eyes scanning his injuries bruising around the neck, fractures across the ribs. He had been beaten, but not killed. Tortured, but not finished. Why leave a rival alive? A guard asked. Keene stood slowly, because he needed to deliver a message. To her surprise, Miguel began to stay. His eyelids fluttered, his breath rasped. Keene knelt beside him, leaning close. Miguel, who did this? She whispered. His lips trembled. He tried to form a word, a name, anything, and then he said it barely audible, but clear enough to freeze the room. Wraith! The guards exchanged uneasy looks. Keene's pulse quickened. Caleb Riker was isolated. No contact, no visitors, no freedom to orchestrate anything. Not officially. How? She murmured to herself. Miguel's eyes widened in sudden terror, and he grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. You need to stop him. Keene leaned closer. Stop him from what? Miguel gasped, struggling for air. It's already starting. And then his hand fell. His body went slack. The heart monitor flatlined. Across the room, the warden whispered, "My God!" A trail of hidden clues. Keene spent the next hour in Riker's sealed cell. No windows, No metal objects allowed. Just a bed, a toilet, and a man sitting perfectly still, staring at the wall. He didn't turn when the door opened. Didn't blink when she approached. "Mr. Riker," she said calmly, "one of your rivals was attacked tonight." Silence. "He named you before he died." More silence. Keen leaned in. How does a man locked away in isolation control a gang on the other side of the building? Riker finally smiled, slow and unsettling. "You think I need to be near them?" he whispered. He turned his head just enough so that she could see the faint scar along his jaw marked from an old assault years earlier. Some people lead by presence. Others lead by fear. And fear travels extremely well. Keen felt a tightness in her chest. "What message did you send tonight?" "My dear detective," Riker said softly, "tonight wasn't the message." He lifted his eyes, cold and calculating. Tonight was a warning. The discovery that changes everything. 3 hours later, as guards reviewed surveillance footage, one of them noticed something strange, a blind spot. A camera angle that had been perfectly functional for years suddenly went dark at the exact moment Miguel had entered the shower area. A blackout. Not long enough to erase evidence. Just long enough to hide something. When technicians pulled the backup feed from the emergency server, they finally saw what had been hidden. Miguel wasn't alone when he entered the room. Someone followed him inside. Someone wearing guard boots. The recording ended abruptly, the frame freezing on a single chilling detail. A gloved hand reaching for Miguel's shoulder. Detective Keen's heart pounded as she replayed the frame again and again, noticing something others didn't: a tattoo on the wrist, barely visible under the cuff. A circle split down the middle with 3 jagged lines. The mark of the severed hand. But the wrist wasn't that of an inmate. It was a guard's. Keen stared in silence as the truth hit her. The prison's most dangerous gang leader didn't need freedom. He already had people walking the halls for him. People with keys. And when she realized that the guard in the footage was missing from roll call, she whispered the words that closed. "Oh no, this goes far deeper than anyone thinks." Detective Mara Keen had seen corruption before, but never like this. A guard vanishing in the middle of a lockdown was more than a red flag. It was a rupture in the entire structure of Blackwater State Penitentiary. And the worst part? Nobody had noticed he was missing until she asked. His name was Officer Darren Holt, a quiet, clean-cut man who had worked at Blackwater for 7 years with 0 disciplinary issues. A man who blended into the background. A man who never caused problems. Keen didn't believe in coincidences. Not here. Not tonight. She stood in the control room as a warden barked orders, demanding every guard be located and accounted for. The radio snapped with tension, voices rising, fear leaking to the otherwise hardened staff. "Find Holt," Monroe ordered. "I want eyes on him now." But Holt wasn't in his assigned post. Wasn't in any cell block. Wasn't anywhere on camera. Keen studied the footage again, staring into the frozen image of Holt's gloved hand on Miguel Duarte's shoulder, the tattoo, the symbol, the unmistakable sign of allegiance to the severed hand. "How long has he been one of them?" she muttered. The warden exhaled sharply. "You think Riker flipped him?" Keen didn't answer. Riker wasn't just a leader. He was a manipulator, a puppeteer. She believed he could influence someone without ever speaking to them directly. Through coded gestures, smuggled notes, favors, intimidation, the methods were endless. But Holt wasn't just a corrupt guard. He was a bridge, a way for the severed hand to move through the prison unnoticed. And if he was missing, he was moving, searching the blind corners. Keen didn't wait for backup. She grabbed a vest, clipped on a radio, and headed straight to the lower corridors of maintenance tunnels that wound beneath the prison like veins. Places cameras didn't reach. Places inmates whispered about with dread. The air was cold, metallic, echoing with distant pipes and the hum of old machinery. Her flashlight cut a thin path through the darkness as she stepped deeper into the tunnels. Then she saw a smear of fresh dirt on the concrete, as if someone had dragged a boot. She followed the trail slowly, steadying her breath. Every step felt heavier, the tension pressing in like a weight. The trail led to a rusted door marked electrical access, authorized personnel only. It was slightly ajar. Keen pushed it open with her shoulder, gun drawn. The room was empty, almost. A faint smell lingered, something chemical, sharp like industrial bleach. Her beam swept the floor until it landed on something wedged behind a transformer box. A boot. She moved closer. Her stomach tightened. It was Holt's. No blood. No sign of a struggle. Just a boot placed neatly on its side, as if left there intentionally. A message. A breadcrumb. Keen whispered, "Someone wants us chasing shadows." The rise of the jackal. Upstairs, tensions exploded. The Iron Jackals had learned about Miguel's attack and were already flooding the cell block with threats, fists, and demands for revenge. Guards scrambled to contain them, but the gang was fueled by desperation and fury. Their leader, Tyrone Castle, known inside as Jackal Prince, stood at the center of the chaos. Sharp eyes, coiled rage, a man with everything to lose now that his top enforcer was dead. "He was my brother," Castle growled when Keen approached his cell. "Somebody's going to pay for that." Keen didn't flinch. "You think the severed hand did this?" Castle's lips curled. "I don't think. I know. That symbol was their calling card. And the only one who moves them like chess pieces is Wraith." Keen leaned forward. "Castle, listen to me. This wasn't just gang retaliation. Hope, one of your guards was part of it." Castle's eyes widened. "A guard?" "Not just a guard. Someone working under Riker's control." The Jackal Prince shook his head in disbelief. "You don't understand Riker. He doesn't just run a gang. He builds systems. He recruits soldiers long before they even realize they've been chosen." Keen's voice lowered. "What is he planning?" Castle's expression shifted, fear mixing with fury. "Something big. Something has been waiting years to finish." "What?" she pressed. Castle stepped closer to the bars. His face tightened. "They call it the Black Dawn Protocol." Keen's skin crawled. "What does that mean?" Castle hesitated. "I only heard bits. Rumors. A coordinated strike. Not just gangs, guards, workers. Everyone is flipped over the years. Something about taking control of the facility for a single night." Keen felt a cold weight settle in her chest. "A takeover?" Castle nodded once. "That's why Miguel was hit. He found out something. He wasn't supposed to." Keen exhaled, her heart pounding. If that's true, then every second counts. The Wraith's warning. She stormed back to Solitary, determination burning through her. Riker sat exactly where she'd left him, calm, composed, studying the wall like a scholar lost in thought. "Enough?" Keen snapped. "Tell me about Black Dawn." Riker's eyebrow lifted, amused. "Impressed you found the name. Tell me what you're planning." He leaned back slightly, the faintest smirk touching his lips. "Detective, you assume I'm the architect. But what if I'm just the inspiration?" Keen took a step closer. "Holt is missing. Miguel is dead. A guard is in your gang. And you're sitting here pretending you're uninvolved." "Oh, I'm involved," Riker whispered. "Deeply, but not in the way you think." The lights flickered overhead. Just once. Barely noticeable. But Riker noticed. He tilted his head, his eyes glinting. "You're running out of time." Keen grabbed the bars. "What does that mean?" Riker's smile widened. "A storm has already started. You're standing in the rain. You just haven't realized you're soaked." Before she could respond, the prison PA crackled to life. "Code Iron. All personnel to crisis stations. Repeat Code Iron." The warden's voice followed, frantic, breaking protocol. "Keen, get to the control room. Now." Riker closed his eyes like a man enjoying a symphony. "Chapter 2, Detective," he murmured. "The part where things fall apart." The break in the system. Keen sprinted back to the main level, pushing past guards who were running in every direction. When she burst into the control room, alarms were already blaring. "What happened?" she demanded. A technician pointed at the monitors, his hands trembling. "The doors. They're opening." She stared at the screens. Cell doors one after another were unlocking across the lower levels. Maximum security. Gang units. Solitary overflow. Not wide open, but unlatched. Just enough to create chaos. "Who triggered it?" she asked. The tech swallowed hard. "Someone used a master override from inside the system." "From where?" He hesitated. From maintenance sublevel 2. Keen froze. That was exactly where she had found Holt's boot. She whispered, "He's still down there." A guard rushed in, out of breath. "Warden, we can't reach the SWAT team. Communications are jammed." The warden turned pale. Jesus, they're already inside the network. Keen felt the horror rising like a tide. This wasn't a random attack, wasn't a simple power play. This was the beginning of Black Dawn. And somewhere beneath their feet, Officer Holt, once loyal, now a ghost soldier, was executing step 1. The countdown had begun. And when the backup generator suddenly died, plunging the entire prison into darkness, Keen said the final words. "Everyone stay calm. This is exactly what they wanted." For 5 full seconds, Blackwater State Penitentiary was swallowed in darkness, a living, breathing void where footsteps, shouts, and distant metal clanks replaced vision. Detective Mara Keen stood frozen in that brief blackout, aware that those seconds were not an accident. They were a signal. When the emergency light snapped on, the prison was transformed. Red warning beacons pulsed like a heartbeat through the corridors. Cell doors that had been left barely unlatched now rattled violently as inmates shoved against them. Guards yelled orders. Radios screamed static. Keen swept her flashlight through the chaos. "Where's the warden?" "Control room," a guard shouted. "He's trying to override the system manually." Keen ran. The hallway twisted with panic inmates banging on steel, guards struggling to maintain order, the high-pitched whine of alarms burrowing under her skin. Every instinct told her the same thing. This wasn't a riot. This was an operation. A plan years in the making. The warden's last stand. When Keen burst into the control room, Warden Monroe was hunched over the main terminal, typing commands with shaking fingers. "It's no use," he growled. "Someone installed a loopback script. Every time I shut down one access point, another one starts up." Keen scanned the monitor's section. B doors were swinging open, one after another. Fights broke out instantly. Guards were overwhelmed. "How do we isolate the mainframe?" she asked. "We can't. Not from here. The root admin control is in the sublevel maintenance hub." His voice cracked. "Where Holt is?" Keen's chest tightened. Holt wasn't just using the prison. He was using the prison's own infrastructure against them. "We need a tactical team," she said. "We don't have one." Monroe snapped. "Communications are jammed. He's cut us off from the outside." Keen stared at the screens, the spreading chaos, the spreading violence. If the severed hand took full control of the facility, the gangs would tear each other apart. Anyone in their path would be collateral damage. "Then I'll go," she said. Monroe grabbed her arm. "Detective, if you go down there alone." "I'm not dying tonight," Keen said, pulling free. "But if we don't stop this now, 100 will." She grabbed a flashlight, a spare vest, and descended into the depths of Blackwater. The belly of the prison, the sublevel maintenance tunnels, felt like entering a forgotten world. Pipes hissed. Chains clanged softly from overhead hooks. Water dripped from rusted valves like the ticking of a clock. Keen moved quietly, her gun raised, her pulse steady. Then she heard its footsteps. Slow, heavy. She pressed her back against the wall as a shadow stretched across the corner. Officer Holt stepped into view. Except he wasn't dressed like a prison guard anymore. His uniform jacket was gone, replaced by a black tactical vest marked with a symbol of the severed hand. His eyes looked empty, hollowed out, not angry, not frantic, but devoted. "Darren," Keen said carefully, "you don't have to do this." Holt's lips curved into a slow, eerie smile. "Detective, this was always my purpose." He lifted a handheld device, the master override trigger. Keen aimed her gun. "Put it down." "You're already too late," Holt whispered. With his free hand, he tapped the button on the wall. The lights flickered. The tunnel doors behind Keen slammed shut, and a loud metallic clang echoed as locks engaged. Holt's voice echoed through the narrow corridor. "I was chosen years ago. Riker sees potential in people the rest of you ignore. He gave us a future. A new order." Keen moved slowly sideways, trying to angle herself between pipes for cover. "What's the endgame, Holt?" He inhaled sharply, almost reverently. "Control. True control. Riker shows us how to break a system without firing a gun. Tonight, the prison falls. Tomorrow, the network expands. Keen's heart hammered. You're blowing up the prison. Holt laughed a low, chilling sound. Explosions are crude. Black Dawn is precision. Collapse the leadership. Flip the loyal. And leave the rest to destroy each other. Keen tightened her grip on her weapon. That's murder. That's rebirth, Holt said. Then he pressed another button on the override trigger. On the overhead monitor, Keen saw something she feared more than anything. The door to Caleb Riker's solitary cell was unlocking. No, she breathed. Holt smiled. The king rises. Keen fired. The shot hit Holt's shoulder, spinning him backward. He dropped the override device. It skittered across the concrete floor, sparks flickering from its casing. The tunnel erupted in chaos. Holt lunged for the device. Keen tackled him. They struggled, slamming against the pipes, fists swinging in the dim red light. Holt fought like a man possessed, wild, desperate, furious. His elbow cracked hard against her jaw. Pain flashed white across her vision, but she held on, grappling for control. He grabbed a loose pipe wrench and swung. She ducked, the metal smashing into the wall beside her. She reached for her gun. Holt raised the wrench again. Keen grabbed the override trigger from the ground and slammed it against the side of his head. Holt collapsed. Keen stumbled back, breathless, blood dripping down her cheek. She stared at the override device. One button remained active. System reboot, emergency lockdown. Her fingers trembled. Please work, she whispered. She pressed it. The prison lights blazed white. Door locks clamped shut. Gate slammed. The alarm shifted pitch. And above her, chaos slowed. Black Dawn stalled, but not stopped. The final confrontation. Keen raced back to solitary. Riker's cell door was open. Her heart dropped. Riker stood in the middle of the hall, calm as ever, hand behind his back, guard unconscious around him. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Impressive, he said softly. I didn't think you'd reach the reboot in time. Keen raised her weapon. It's over, Riker. He shook his head. Detective, this was never about escape. He stepped closer. I don't need to leave this place to control everything beyond it. Blackwater is my headquarters, my fortress. He smiled faintly. And tonight proves it works. Keen's finger rested on the trigger. Get on the ground. Riker didn't move. Do you know how many nodes I planted? How many guards, workers, contractors answer to me? Holt was one soldier. There are dozens. Keen's eyes widened. Black Dawn wasn't meant to succeed. Riker leaned in. It was meant to test loyalty. Keen froze. They pass, he whispered. Before she could react, guards stormed down the hallway, weapons drawn. Riker stepped back, hands raised, smiling like a man who had already won. Back to your cell. One guard barked. Riker winked at Keen. I look forward to the next phase. He allowed himself to be cuffed, allowed himself to be escorted, allowed the door to shut. Keen stood there, shaken to her core. The takeover was never the goal. It was an experiment, a recruitment drive, a map of who would follow him into the next operation. And Riker now knew exactly who his soldiers were. The haunting twist. Hours later, as sunrise tinted the sky outside Blackwater, Keen prepared her report. Exhaustion weighed on her, but her mind kept replaying Riker's final words. She turned to the warden. We need to isolate every guard with ties to Holt. Suspend anyone with unexplained absences. Lock down internal channels. The warden nodded. We'll move fast. But as Keen stepped out into the parking lot, her phone buzzed with a blocked number. She answered. A voice whispered, Phase 2 begins soon. Her blood went cold. Who is this? A pause, then a familiar, chilling whisper. You stopped a warning. Detective, not the plan. The line went dead. Keen stared at the phone, horror tightening her chest. If Riker was behind bars, then who just called her? And how many more ghost soldiers were already out there? As the wind swept across the parking lot, carrying the distant echoes of Blackwater's alarms, the final narrator line closes the story. If you thought this case was intense, wait until you see what comes next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the truth that's still unfolding.